Hi everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name's Nicole and this is Darvanalee Designs Studio, and today we are here for block C in our A to Z Quilt Block Challenge for 2023. This one is called Clay's Choice. It is a 12-inch block, but I have included in the instructions for a 9-inch block for those that want to make smaller blocks. So let's get started. So we are here for block C for the A to Z Quilt Block Challenge. It is called Clay's Choice. Today I have done something a little bit different with the pattern piece. So you'll find the link down below for that. Today I've included a 9-inch block in this one because I had some requests for smaller blocks, and so from here on out I will be including a 9-inch, and I do have to go back and edit and add the 9-inch cutting instructions for the first two blocks, so that will be sorted by the time you see this video. Okay, so today I'm going to be making the 12-inch block. I've already made the 9-inch block, so you can see there. So now you have an option of making the bigger blocks, which are going to be random sizes. They're not going to be uniform, or you can make all your blocks at 9-inch. So there will be the 9-inch cutting instructions, or alternatively, you can make both like I have. All right, so once you've got your cutting instructions, you're going to cut out all of your fabrics, and you need 3 fabrics, as you see, 3 colored fabrics and a background fabric. So these are the colors that I chose. These were just in my scrap bin. So a lot of my fabrics might not look that great together because I'm trying to get through my scraps. So this was a piece of white fabric that I've had. It's from backings and stuff like that. So I'm trying to utilize that. So that's why you'll see this is the consistent block. This is the consistent color throughout the blocks that I'm making, which is the background fabric. And then, as I said, I've just got some scraps here. This is a Riley Blake fabric. I believe this is a Riley Blake fabric as well. And this is just an Emma Louise quilter's muslin, I think it's called, and it is just a plain fabric. So once you've got all those fabrics, you'll need a few other things. You'll need your rotary cutter. You'll need a pencil to mark the back of your fabrics. You'll need some best press to prep your fabrics. Of course, you're going to need your fork pins. They're my favorite. Some thread snips for your sewing machine. And of course, you're going to need some quilting rulers, an iron and a ironing pad, and a working sewing machine. All right, so let's have a little bit of a look at this block. You can see it's a pretty basic block. It's not too hard. We're just going to be working with half square triangles. Now, the reason that I'm doing another one with half square triangles is because the consensus was that a few people had a little bit of issue being new to half square triangles. They had a little bit of issues and they just wanted to basically, they were a little bit scared of them. So I thought, well, you know what? We're going to do them again, and we'll probably do them a couple more times sporadically throughout the year, so you'll get the hang of them. Now today we are just going to be working with squares. This is the 9-inch block, okay, and when you've sewn this together before it's in the quilt, this will measure 9.5 inches. Okay, so once it's in the quilt, it'll be 9 inches. All right, so that's what it's going to look like. I think those fabrics go together pretty well. And how I chose my fabrics was I just looked at the colors. The blue, I didn't really have an aqua that was going to go with this fabric. I thought of using the aqua that I used last week, but it just didn't go with this fabric. So I just went with a paler blue, and I think that works really well. And then with the green, I just sort of put this blue speckled fabric up against some different greens that I had in my scrap bin, and this one came up a treat. So that is what it's going to look like when it's done. So let's have a look at what we have to cut out. So I have made the cutting instructions very beginner friendly. Okay, we are just going to be working with squares today, and we're going to be making some half square triangles, and I have made all of the fabrics a little bit bigger so you've got room to trim down, and you'll actually have a decent amount to trim down. I didn't just go like 1/8 of an inch. I actually went a full quarter bigger than what you actually need, so you've got plenty of wiggle room there. Okay, so just be aware of that. You do have some wiggle room. All right, so I already have my squares cut out, and there are a few things that you need to do. Okay, these here are just remaining as squares, and because I'm working with the 12-inch, I'm not going to say any measurements or anything in case you're watching this video and you're working with the 9. I don't want to confuse you. So the 4 white squares and the 4 green squares, we are just going to set them aside because they are these squares here, okay, and they are just going to be left as they are. So we're going to make some half square triangles. We have 4 of our patterned fabric, and I'm just going to lay them down here. And I've done a little bit of prep off camera. On the wrong side of your lighter fabrics, you're just going to draw a diagonal line, and then we're going to place these right sides together. You can put some pins in. If you're going to put some pins in, I suggest you put them over here, because we are going to sew on either side of these lines. So line them up. Make sure that your raw edges are lining up. Okay, we don't want it on like this. We want it nice and squared up. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a croaky voice today, so you'll just have to bear with me. I was cleaning out our room and it was very dusty, and now I've got a very croaky voice. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to sew on either side a 1/4 inch on either side of this line. Okay, and it's just like we did last time with our half square triangles. And if you've been watching my crafting with DDs, I've been working a lot with half square triangles, and you will get to see that there as well. So check those videos out. There's lots of little things that I do on the channel where you can pick up techniques and stuff like that. And if I can find a quick way, I will find a quick way to do it. So as I said, today we're not going to be working with any biases or anything like that. We are going to be just working with squares, which means that our triangles aren't going to distort and we have room to trim them down. So let's just start stitching these through, and we're going to do a little bit of chain piecing. As I said, we are going to use our 1/4 inch presser foot, and we're going to do a 1/4 inch away, stitch a 1/4 inch away from this line. Now I just line up my presser foot against this like my little 1/4 inch toe. I line that up against the line, and then I just stitch it down. Now, because I always open my stitches as well, I want to have my machine at its default setting, and it's about a 2mm. Just do a bit of a test if you're going to press your seams open, and just make sure that you've got a little bit smaller stitch length. It'll just make it a lot easier for you. All right, so let's start stitching these down. And because I'm doing chain piecing, I will have my needle in the down position at this point. Okay, and then I'll just feed my other one just under that. And again, using my presser foot is against that line that I drew. And then we'll take our blue ones. So at this point, I don't snip them apart or anything like that. I just turn them around, and I'm going to feed that back through. And now I'm going to do a 1/4 inch seam, again doing exactly the same thing as what I've just done on the other side. Okay, so now we've got our little bunting here, and we're just going to snip these apart. Get rid of any long threads that might be in the way. And then I'll just give them a quick press. And now we've got our little pieces all sewn together, and now what we need to do is cut them apart. So just make sure that you get rid of any long threads that are in the way. And then I'm just going to place my ruler onto that line, and then I'm going to cut them apart. And then I will press these seams open. And then we will square them up. Okay, so now that we've pressed all those, we are going to now square them up, and as I said, I've given you enough wiggle room here to trim them up. Okay, there is a little bit extra on each one. Now what we're going to do is we need to match them up to the squares that we've cut. So basically what we're going to do now is we're going to square them up to the 3.5 because they need to match these squares here. Alright, so we're just going to place our ruler on here, okay, and you can see I've got a little bit extra room there, and we are going to place our 45-degree angle onto our seam allowance. In most cases you're just going to be taking the dog ears off. There's not going to be a lot of waste, but you'll have enough wiggle room, okay. And then we just cut that side. And then we turn it around so we've got our 2 straight edges here, and then we line that up on our 3.5 inch. So you can see there that we've got plenty of room. Okay, we need to take care when we're sewing, make sure that we've got our 1/4 inch seam allowance and we haven't gone too big, because then that will take away from our fabric. And so I'm lining my 3.5 inch mark up on the straight edges that I have here, and then I've got my diagonal line along that seam there. Okay, and that means that my half square triangle is going to be nice and straight. Okay, and then I'm going to repeat that with the remainder of my blocks. Okay, so they are all squared up. Now, I will give you a tip here. If you're a little bit nervous, okay, about only having a small amount to trim off, so you've seen there that I didn't have a great deal, that there was enough there to trim off, but there wasn't a lot. If you're a beginner, you might be a little bit nervous about that. There is nothing wrong with taking your original square size, which were 4 inches, okay, and making them a little bit larger. So you could go 4 1/4 or 4 1/2. Now you're going to get a lot more waste of fabric, but if you're nervous about doing half square triangles, just add another 1/4 inch on it or 1/8 of an inch on it, just depending what you're comfortable with, until you get the hang of them. And the more that you do them, the more you will become more confident, and you will be able to square them up without too much of a problem. Okay, so you can always do that with any of your half square triangles, especially when you're using squares. If you're nervous about them, knowing that you've got to trim them up, just make those squares a little bit bigger, and make sure that you trim them up to the size that you need. And in our case, it was 3 1/2 inches, okay, for the 12-inch block. All right, so now that we've got them all squared and squared up, I will just give them another light press, because now we are going to bring our design board back and we are ready for our layout. Now this block is a 16 patch block, so that means that we have a little bit of sewing in the construction side of it, so just take your time. And I do mine sort of like a little bit of a puzzle, where I just lay it all out, and then I'll sew half of the block together, then I'll sew this half of the block together, then I'll sew each row together, and then so forth and so on. So you're going to actually see this all happening, because I'm going to bring up my design board and we are going to place our cornerstones, because we know our green one, and we just use our little cutting instructions here. We've got a picture on that, and we just use that as our guide. And then we're going to place our white blocks, making sure that they are the right way, because let's face it, Nicole always tends to put one the wrong way. Okay, now we need our half square triangles with the white fabric. Okay, and these are just going to overlap a bit, but it'll give you a general idea of what the block looks like. Okay, I will get around to making a new design board that's a little bit bigger, but this works really well for the channels, so we'll just utilize every last skerrick of it, won't we? Alright, so these are the outer points of our inner pinwheel, and I'm just placing them in place so we know where they've got to go. Okay, and then now we can do our centerpiece. So you can see here that it's making a larger pinwheel in there. Okay, helps if you put it the right way, Nicole. It'll probably look a little bit better, don't you reckon? Alright. Okay, so that is our layout. Now that's looking pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is I will work this half of the block first. So basically these two are going to be together, and I'm just going to place them like so. And then I'm going to pick them up and I'm going to sew this side, and I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm making sure, you can see there, that all my raw edges are lining up, and I will chain piece these through. At this point, because this is a 16 patch, it is going to have a lot of seams that we need to take care of, and so at this point I'm going to actually press all of my seams open. As you know, I like to do that, and so that's what I'm going to do. So you can see there it's starting to come together. So all I'm going to do is pull one off at a time and press them open, and then just lay that back down again. Takes a little bit of time, but it gives you a nice easy part to sew together. To sew together once they're all done. And I just like to do it this way. I just find that I get better results. And now what we're going to do is we're going to join these together. So we'll chain piece these through, get rid of any long threads that might be in your way. Okay, make sure that you've got your cornerstones on the outside. And again, we're just going to line up our raw edges, making sure that nothing's wonky, and chain piece that through. And our next one. Now this one's a little bit trickier. We have a diagonal to line up. So we want to make sure that our diagonal is lining up. And if you've squared these up properly, it will just lay on there and you won't have any problem at all. So you can see there, I've squared it up nicely, and I'm just going to hold that there, but you can put a pin in if you want to. If you're a beginner, I suggest that you do. And when you pin it, all you're going to do is you're going to go use a straight pin, and then you can pin that there, and then that is not going to move on you at all. And you can see our raw edges are lining up. Okay, and then we've got another one with our diagonal. Again, that is what I'm going to line up first, is my diagonal. You can see that it's lying there nicely, and if you're a beginner, pop a pin in, and then that way it won't move on you. Make sure that all your other raw edges are lining up as well. Okay, so they're all sewn together. Let's snip them out, and at this point I'm just going to press them as we snip them. So as you can see, it's pretty, like, it goes together pretty good. As long as you've got it laid out, especially for those beginners. Now, I know that we've got a few people that are beginners patchworkers, and they've been sharing their blocks over in the group, and they're absolutely beautiful. The ones that they've been sharing have been absolutely gorgeous, and so I'm hoping that some of these tips and tricks will help you along the way. So you can see here the point of the white is a 1/4 inch away from the edge, and that's what we're hoping for. So you can see here our point is a 1/4 inch away, and the same down this one as well. And you can see here as well that we've got those 1/4 inch, so that's really good. That's what we're aiming for. Sometimes when we're squaring up and things like that, we can think we've cut it right and we may have cut it wrong, so we'll lose our points because we don't have a 1/4 inch. Now if you're a beginner, I wouldn't worry about that. Enjoy the journey, keep going. If you can't live with it, unpick it by all means, but for the most part, just give it a go. You can always do another block. So when it comes time to sewing my rows together, I will place the top one onto the second one, and as always I will start in the middle and work my way out, and I'm going to just focus on my seams. So you can see here we've got a couple of seams that we've got to line up, and this is where my fork pins come in handy. These are my favorite pins to use, especially when nesting seams. I make sure that my seams are laying flat on both sides, and then I'm just going to line them up. And that's all I'm focusing on at the moment. I'm making sure that the top raw edge is lining up nicely and that it's not going past it or anything. And both of my, all 3 of my seams are lining up nicely. So you can see there, that's down a little bit. So I just want to bring that top one up to match it, and then my raw edges will line up. Okay, and I can see there that my little seam is matching up nicely. Alright, so that's the first one, and then I will do exactly the same thing with the bottom one. I will lay them on top of one another. So I'll take the 3rd row to lay it onto the 4th one. Line up those raw edges and seams, making sure that everything is lining up properly. This is the point where you want to take your time and not rush it. And as I said, using these fork pins has been an absolute game changer for me for nesting seams, and hopefully if you haven't used them before, we've got a link down below for them. I suggest that if you buy nothing else this year, buy these. These are going to help you with your seams just nesting so nicely. And if you've been on the channel for a while, you know that I love them, and I talk about them all the time because I think everybody should use them. I used to use just straight pins, and I used to go into the seam and come out in the seam, and more often than not my seams would shift when I was sewing, whereas with this one I can pin them both, and I'm just looking at that, and that just looks to be a little bit out, so I'm just going to double check, and this one was out. So I'm just going to bring this across and see if that makes a big difference. All right, so I was out a little bit, and that's why you should double check. Okay, and now that's going to lay there a little bit better. Much better. And this one, now you don't want to stretch your blocks at any time, but sometimes you might have to do a little bit of gentle persuasion to get it to go the way you want it to. Alright, so all I'm going to do now is go over to the sewing machine, and because they're all pinned in place, I'm good to go for my seams, and I'm going to use my 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm just going to stitch that down. We now have those 2 rows sewn together, so that was the last one we sewed, was our top one. So we'll take our little fork pins out, okay, and we are going to head over and press this down, but you can see there that our seams have lined up quite nicely, and then we'll do the same with this one, and open that up, turn it around the right way, and there we go. All right, so I'm going to not worry about pressing these open right now because I'm going to join these 2 together. So again, we're going to lay them on top, and I'm going to grab my center seam, and I'm going to line up my raw edges and also nest up my seam, and then I'm going to pop a pin in there, and then I'm going to do the same on this end, making sure that everything is lining up, my top raw edge and my seams, because that's what we're going for. Get rid of any of your long threads, take your pins out, And now we'll head over to the pressing board and we're going to press those 3 seams open. You can see there, our points are all coming in and they're looking really good. So let's press it open and see how our block looks finished. Alright, so we have pressed all our seams open and you can see here on the back there is a lot of seams coming into one another. So if you press these seams open, you can give them a really good press and they'll sit nice and flat. So when it comes time to quilting, you don't have that big bulky point there and it just sits nice and flat. And as you can see, that is the 12-inch block there. Now it is measuring 12.5 inches right now, so don't trim it down. You want to make sure that you've got 1/4 inch where all your points are, because if you trim it down you will lose your points when you go to sew it in a quilt. And of course we've got our little 9-inch block as well. But that's it today. That is the Clay's Choice, a block C for the A to Z Quilt Block Challenge 2023. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate you being here, and I do hope that you enjoyed making the Clay's Choice and also doing the bonus size or one or the other. I know that some of you lovelies out there really do love to quilt, so you probably do both of them. I know I like to do that sort of thing as well. But as I said, that is it from me today. If you have yet to subscribe, make sure that you do all the things like subscribe and share, as it says over my shoulder there. And that is it for me today. You have a wonderful day and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.